Well, folks, one of the things the president has talked a lot about in terms of changing the aesthetic of the country is the fact that we have so much ugly architecture all over the place in the United States. And architecture can, in fact, be a sort of reflection of the ambitions of a people. There's a reason why the founders used so much classical architecture when they were building, for example, Washington, D.C., because they had those sorts of aspirations for the United States of America. The sort of move toward brutalism and ugliness that happened in public buildings in the 1970s has been a disaster. Joining us online to discuss is Justin Shubow. He's president of the National Civic Art Society, a nonprofit organization that promotes the classical tradition in public art. He's also former chairman of the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts, the Aesthetic Review Board for Washington, D.C., who's appointed there by President Trump. He'd be a fantastic leader of the National Endowment for the Arts, which either needs to be completely ended or redirected toward, actually good art. Justin, thanks so much for joining the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So why don't you talk a little bit about what you think the Trump vision for things like the National Endowment for the Arts should be? What should we be looking for in terms of architecture in America's public buildings?
Well, I think there's going to be an agenda of make America beautiful again. There's a tremendous amount of optimism in the new administration. And it is telling that on day one, President Trump issued this visionary memorandum calling for the General Services Administration, the agency that oversees federal buildings, to get back with him with recommendations about how to beautify federal buildings, specifically to respect classical and traditional heritage and require that there be public input when building design decisions are being made. The memorandum will lead to a new executive order like the one he issued at the end of his first term, but was sadly revoked by Biden. That order revolutionized federal architecture by turning it from ugly modernism to beautiful classical and traditional design. It looked back to the founding fathers, as you said, who consciously chose the classical tradition for the core buildings of government, looking to harken back to democratic precedents in ancient Greece and Rome, and recognizing that classical architecture is time-honored and timeless. The founders inaugurated a tradition of classical public architecture that lasted for about 150 years until we got the advent and the hegemony of modernism that included brutalism, like you mentioned, that unadored concrete style like the FBI building, this intimidating, dismal structure that I call the Ministry of Fear. And President Trump wanted to change the direction and to build buildings that ennoble the United States, that inspire us, and actually reflect the preferences of the American people. And Trump has indicated that this devotion to beauty is going to extend even outside our federal buildings. So, for instance, when he announced Sean Duffy for Secretary of Transportation, it said that he will promote, yes, beauty, competence. Competence and excellence, but also beauty in infrastructure, including airports. And so, for instance, there's an incredible opportunity in New York to build a new classical Penn Station, which would have tremendous symbolic impact on the United States in the same way that the rebuilding of Notre Dame had an impact for French civilization. Now, you also asked about the National Endowment for the Arts. Now, I don't want to be presumptuous about serving as chairman, but it would be a true honor to be appointed. My vision for the National Endowment, and it's important to understand that the NEA is the largest funder of the arts and arts education in the country with an annual budget of $210 million. My vision comes from Dana Gioia, the masterful poet and translator who ran the NEA under George W. Bush. And he said, a great nation deserves great art. For too long, the NEA has not been producing great art. And I think this is one major reason that Republicans and conservatives have long called for defunding it. But I do think that the highest art is that which is beautiful, profound, or moving. And we can foment a cultural renaissance in this country by using the NEA as a vehicle.
Well, Justin, good luck to you in the quest. If you do become the head of the NEA, that would be wonderful. Obviously, President Trump's vision for revitalizing America's architecture and making the country beautiful again would be really nice, because the fact is that so many of our federal buildings are, in fact, deliberately ugly and designed to intimidate. Justin does great work on this. You can go check out his work at a wide variety of sources, including City Journal. Justin Shubow, thanks so much for the time.
Thanks for having me.